My name is Brian Collins, and this video is an alternative to actually having a live interview with the folks at the Los Angeles County Outdoor Science School. So today we're going to be looking at a forest ecosystem. Specifically, we're going to be starting out in a pine forest, and we're going to be talking about forest succession, which is basically how a forest comes to be a forest. So as you can see, looks like an old structure here, which might have been a barn or a house or something, and it's probably as old as many of these trees are. And the very basis of forest succession is moving from an agricultural type field that was used for farming by people, and for whatever reason, whether it might be weather, a severe flood, or a fire, the surrounding forest was burned down or destroyed in some way, resulting in what is basically a field. And as you can see by looking around, you notice most of these trees here are pine trees. The smaller trees in the understory are hardwoods, and we will talk about that a little more as we move down the trail. So here is a good example of where the field would have been. You can see how sparse this area is. There's these open patches where there's just a little bit of ground cover, and then it's surrounded by these tall pine trees. And the pine trees in this area grow pretty abundantly, mostly because of the dry soil. You can see it's very dry here, and the pine trees really get into the dry soil, whereas the hardwoods need a little more moisture in the soil. But these pine trees are only going to live to be about 120 years old maximum, and as they get older they're going to be more prone to disease, at which point these smaller hardwoods are going to take over this section of the forest. And we'll move down the trail and we'll see where this next part of succession takes place, where it becomes a mixed hardwood, where the smaller hardwoods and the larger pines will be coming closer and closer to size. A really good question is how you can tell the pine trees apart from all other trees, and the answer comes in two parts. One is the leaves, as you can see, which are most commonly referred to as needles, are very long and thin and bunched together. And the other thing is that pine trees, unlike most other trees, don't have flowers. Instead they have cones. And in comparison to a hardwood tree, you can see these leaves are very different than these. So if you're wondering which one's which, a good way to tell is to compare the leaves. So you can see from the looks of this gully here, which who knows why it was created. Probably by flowing water would be my best bet. You can see that we're going downhill now, and as we're going downhill, you can see, or you can feel actually, that the temperature is a little bit cooler, and these are all factors that tie in with why the pines do so well up at the little bit of a higher elevation and drier soil. These are factors that we need to know about in ecosystems that we refer to as abiotic and biotic. Abiotic being factors that were never living, biotic being factors that are things that are alive, such as the trees. Okay, so right here is a really good example of when the forest begins to become mixed. In other words, there are just as many pine trees as there are hardwoods, and they're all about the same size. And you can see this particular tree right here, which is a white oak, is at least as big, if not bigger, than this pine tree over here. So you get a real sense of that movement from the field succession, where this is becoming more dense, and we're seeing more hardwoods and more growth. Okay, here again is a really excellent example, and you really get a feeling of a definite change here, where we're seeing more and more oaks and more dense undergrowth vegetation of the same variety, and less pine trees. And in fact, we see that this one has succumbed to not getting enough light from the canopy from these hardwoods, with the very leafy and very green. So this one didn't make it because of that. So this is that same gully that we were just at, a few hundred feet back that way. And as you can see here, the ground here is much more moist and less drained as it was at the top. And a lot of these harder wood trees, like the beeches and the oaks, really enjoy this moisture soil, and they also very much thrive in the deeper soils. Whereas when we were up top, the ground up at the top is very dense, and the roots don't go as deep. Whereas this moisture ground, they're able to really dig down in there and suck out that moisture with their roots. So again, we want to keep in mind the abiotic and biotic factors and how they relate to one another in an ecosystem. And something like water is going to be an abiotic factor, as well as temperature, and as well as the soil condition, the moisture in it, the chemicals in it. And these two things, working with the health of the overall forest ecosystem, meaning the trees and how healthy they are, or how much they can continue to grow, are working together to keep the entire ecosystem as a whole healthy and vibrant. So here is where we can see the complete evolution of the succession of the forest, where there are really no more pine trees here, and it's primarily these hardwood trees. This one's a beech, but most of them will end up being oaks and hickories in the end. So this is a sourwood, and these trees like less drained areas, which is probably why it's so close to the creek here, which we're going to go look at right now. So obviously, now that we've come down the trail, we're at pretty different place right now. This is the stream which flows through here, and I wanted to point out, just like we talked a little bit at the beginning of this trip about the farmer having cut down the trees and cultivated the land or overworked it, and then the soil wasn't too good for farming anymore, so it picked up and left, and that's when forest succession or field succession starts, with the hardier grasses, crabgrasses, horseweed, and that becomes a community of grasses, and then the pines move in, and the forest begins. So here we can see also human interaction with the ecosystem on a modern level, more specifically like right now. If we look along this bank here, we can see that the roots are exposed from this beech tree. There's not too much vegetation here along the bank, and this is caused mostly by erosion from people using the trail, which is why this section of the trail is closed off, because the people who are managing the trail are trying to bring back some of this vegetation and rebuild it a little bit. So we should always be conscious of our footprints in places like this and be aware of what kind of impact we have, even just being here at all.